Hey everyone, and welcome to our deep dive. We're going to be talking about one of the most impactful books ever written,
Absolutely.
On the Origin of Species by Charles Darwin.
A classic.
So get ready to explore the world of natural selection
Yeah.
and discover how a work from the 1800s still shapes our understanding of life today.
It really does. It's amazing how relevant Darwin's ideas remain, even in the face of all the scientific advancements since his time.
So true. Before we jump into the specifics of natural selection, though, can you set the stage for us? Like, what was the prevailing scientific thought before Darwin published this work?
Well, before Darwin, most scientists believed that species were fixed and unchanging.
Okay.
They thought that every creature was created exactly as we see it today.
Oh, wow. So a static world, no evolution.
Pretty much, yeah. But to be fair to Darwin, he wasn't the first to suggest that species could change over time.
Right.
He actually gives credit to earlier thinkers who were already challenging the idea of immutability.
Oh, interesting.
Folks like Dean Herbert and von Buch.
So it's like these groundbreaking ideas often have roots in earlier work.
Yeah, exactly.
So what set Darwin apart then?
I think Darwin's genius was in developing a comprehensive and convincing theory to explain how species change, and that's where natural selection comes in.
Okay, so natural selection, survival of the fittest.
Yeah, that's the basic idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, but there's a little more to it than that.
Okay.
Imagine a world where more individuals are born than can possibly survive.
So constant competition for resources mates everything else.
Exactly. In this struggle, individuals with any advantageous variation, even something slight, have a better chance of surviving and reproducing.
Okay.
And over generations, those advantageous traits become more common,
Yeah.
leading to significant changes in the species.
So Darwin uses this analogy of wedging to illustrate this. Could you explain that?
Yeah, so picture a wedge being forced into a crevice.
Okay.
Just as that wedge slowly widens the gap, advantageous variations slowly outcompete less favorable traits, gradually shaping the species over time.
That's a really cool image. So Darwin drew inspiration for this theory from his observations of variations within species, I imagine.
Absolutely. Darwin was fascinated by the diversity of life, both in the wild and in domesticated animals.
Okay.
And in fact, his observations of domesticated animals, especially pigeons, played a crucial role in shaping his thinking.
Wait, pigeons? Darwin was a pigeon fancier.
He dabbled in pigeon breeding.
Wow.
He was intrigued by the incredible diversity of pigeon breeds,
Okay.
some with really exaggerated features.
Uh-huh.
At the time, many breeders believed each breed was a separate species.
Oh, wow.
But Darwin realized something profound.
What'd he realize?
He recognized that those extreme pigeon breeds weren't different species, but products of human-directed selection.
Okay.
So if humans could create such drastically different varieties through selective breeding, Darwin realized that nature could do the same, but over vastly longer periods.
Wow, that's brilliant.
Yeah.
It's like he saw evolution in action just right there in his pigeon coops.
Exactly. And this led him to explore the factors that drive natural selection, like the role of inheritance and the impact of habits on physical traits.
Okay.
One example he used was the difference in bone structure between wild and domesticated ducks.
The ducks. Okay, tell me about the ducks.
Darwin noticed that domesticated ducks, which didn't need to fly as much, had proportionally lighter wing bones than their wild counterparts.
Okay.
Meanwhile, their leg bones were heavier, likely due to more walking.
Interesting.
This illustrated how lifestyle and the use or disuse of certain body parts could impact anatomy over generations.
So even subtle differences in habits could lead to significant changes over time.
Exactly. And Darwin realized that this wasn't limited to domesticated animals. He saw it in the wild as well.
Okay.
And this led him to consider the role of intercrossing and isolation in shaping species.
Okay, break down intercrossing and isolation for me.
Sure. Darwin recognized that while intercrossing helps maintain uniformity within a species, occasionally mixing things up can introduce beneficial variations.
Okay.
But isolation can be just as crucial.
Okay.
Imagine a population separated on an island, limited gene pool, unique environment.
Sounds like the perfect recipe for evolution. So what kind of challenges would these isolated populations face and how might they adapt?
That's the question that fueled Darwin's thinking.
Yeah.
He saw these isolated environments as natural laboratories for evolution, where new species could potentially arise.
This all makes sense, but I'm sure Darwin encountered pushback to these ideas, especially considering the limitations of scientific understanding at the time.
Oh, yeah, of course.
So what were some of the main challenges to his theory?
You're right. One of the biggest challenges Darwin anticipated was the apparent lack of transitional forms in the fossil record.
Okay.
Remember, paleontology was a young science back then.
Right, so the missing links.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Critics questioned why we don't see a smooth, continuous progression of fossils if evolution is a gradual process.
Uh-huh.
Darwin acknowledged the imperfection of the fossil record, likening it to a history book with most of its pages ripped out.
So we only have glimpses of the past, not the full story.
Right? Darwin argued that we shouldn't expect to find every single step in the evolutionary journey preserved in fossils.
Okay.
But he believed that as paleontology progressed, more and more transitional forms would be discovered.
It's fascinating to think how paleontological discoveries since Darwin's time have either supported or challenged his predictions.
Yeah.
But even with a limited fossil record, Darwin found other evidence to support his theory.
Right.
He even tackled the tricky issue of instinct.
Yes, he did.
Oh.
Darwin argued that even the most complex instincts, like the slave-making behavior in certain ants or the intricate cell-making instinct of bees, could be explained by the gradual accumulation of slight variations through natural selection.
Ants enslaving other ants. That's pretty wild.
It is.
How did he explain that?
He suggested that it likely evolved in stages. Perhaps those ants initially just raided other nests for food, carrying off pupa.
Okay.
Over time, some pupa might have hatched before being eaten, and their instinctive behavior, beneficial to the raiders, might have been inadvertently selected for.
Okay, so a gradual progression from stealing food to stealing workers.
Exactly. And this same principle applies to other elaborate instincts, like the bee's seemingly intelligent honeycomb construction.
Yeah.
Darwin argued that even those seemingly complex behaviors have a history of modification through natural selection.
So this brings up the question of hybridism.
Yeah,
Did Darwin explore how the mixing of different species plays into his theory?
he did. Darwin delved into the complexities of hybridism and its implications for understanding species boundaries.
Okay.
He observed that the fertility of hybrid offspring varied widely. Sometimes two distinct species could produce offspring, but those offspring might be sterile.
Like the classic mule.
Precisely. But in other cases, hybrids could be fertile, blurring the lines between what defines a species.
Okay.
Darwin also noticed that closely related species were more likely to produce fertile hybrids than distantly related species, a concept he called systematic affinity.
So essentially, the more similar two species were, the more likely their hybrid offspring would be fertile. Okay.
Darwin's exploration of hybridism added another layer to his understanding of the intricate relationships between species.
While we could talk about the intricacies of hybridism all day, I think it's time we move on to other fascinating aspects of Darwin's work.
Indeed, there's so much more to explore. Welcome back to our deep dive into Darwin's On the Origin of Species.
Yes.
As we delve further into his work, we'll see how Darwin addressed some of the thorniest questions raised by his theory.
Yeah.
Questions that continue to intrigue us today.
I think it's remarkable how Darwin anticipated many of the debates we still have about evolution today.
Yeah.
What were some of those hot-button issues that he tackled head-on?
Well, one of the most common objections to Darwin's theory was the idea that natural selection couldn't account for the incredible beauty and complexity.
Yeah.
We see in nature, critics argued that such intricate designs pointed to a divine creator,
Right.
not a blind process like natural selection.
Yeah, the classic argument from design.
Exactly.
Like, you look at a perfectly formed flower or a bird in flight, and you think that couldn't have just happened by chance.
Exactly. But Darwin countered this argument
Okay.
by emphasizing the cumulative power of selection over immense periods of time.
Right.
He argued that even seemingly insignificant variations, if beneficial, could gradually accumulate over generations, eventually leading to remarkably complex adaptations.
So it's not just random chance, but rather chance variations being filtered through the sieve of natural selection.
Right.
With the environment ultimately deciding what works and what doesn't.
Precisely.
Okay.
And Darwin also challenged the assumption that beauty
Yeah.
is solely a product of divine design. He pointed out that what we perceive as beauty often serves a functional purpose.
Okay.
For example, the vibrant colors of a flower might attract pollinators,
Right.
increasing the plant's reproductive success.
Oh, so those beautiful petals are actually a clever evolutionary strategy. It makes you appreciate the artistry of nature even more, knowing that it's often intertwined with function.
It does, and this brings us to another key point in Darwin's work,
Okay.
the interconnectedness of life.
Okay.
His theory emphasized that all organisms are related through common descent, sharing a common ancestor way back in time.
It's Mind-boggling to think that we're all part of this immense family tree.
I know.
Branching out across billions of years, does Darwin delve into the implications of this interconnectedness for humanity?
He does touch upon it. Yeah. Darwin recognized that his theory had implications
Okay.
beyond the realm of biology.
Right.
He understood that the idea of common descent
Mm-hmm.
and the realization that humans are part of this grand evolutionary tapestry
Yeah.
could have profound philosophical and ethical implications.
Makes sense. If we're all connected through this shared history, it challenges us to reconsider our relationship with the rest of the natural world.
Absolutely. And this leads to another fascinating aspect
Yeah.
of Darwin's work, his exploration of the idea of perfection in nature.
Okay, so what's Darwin's take on perfection?
Well,
It's tempting to look at nature and see it as perfectly designed,
wow.
with each organism perfectly adapted to its niche.
It is tempting, but Darwin argued that natural selection doesn't strive for perfection in some absolute sense.
Okay.
Instead, it works with what's available, gradually improving existing structures and functions.
Right.
This means that organisms, while remarkably well suited to their environments,
Mm-hmm.
aren't necessarily perfect. They carry the baggage of their evolutionary history, so to speak.
Oh, so those seemingly perfect adaptations are more like works in progress,
Yeah.
constantly being shaped by the changing demands of the environment.
Exactly, and this explains why we see so much variation in nature.
Right.
Even within a single species, it also explains why we sometimes see structures or behaviors
Yeah.
that seem less than optimal, like the human appendix.
Right, the appendix.
Yeah.
A classic example of something that seems more like a liability than an asset.
Right? These seemingly imperfect features
Mm-hmm.
are remnants of our evolutionary past, not necessarily flaws in a perfect design.
It's like those old houses with weird additions and renovations over the years.
Yeah.
They might not be perfect, but they tell a story.
I like that analogy, and Darwin was fascinated by these stories told by nature.
Okay.
One of the most compelling challenges to his theory
Yeah.
was the apparent lack of transitional forms in the fossil record,
Right.
those missing links that would show the gradual progression of one species into another.
We touched upon this earlier, but I'm curious to hear more about how Darwin addressed this challenge.
He knew this would be a major criticism, and he tackled it head-on.
Okay.
Darwin argued that the fossil record is inherently incomplete, like a book with many pages ripped out.
Okay.
He didn't expect to find fossils documenting every single step in the evolutionary journey.
Right, but wouldn't that be the ultimate proof of his theory?
Ideally, yes, but Darwin understood that fossilization is a rare event.
Right.
Not every organism that dies leaves behind a fossil. And even those that do are subject to the vagaries of geological processes.
So it's like trying to reconstruct a movie from a handful of scattered frames.
Yes.
You might get the gist of the story, but you're going to miss a lot of details.
A perfect analogy, Darwin acknowledged that the fossil record would likely always be incomplete.
Yeah.
But he believed that as paleontology progressed, more and more transitional forms would be discovered,
Uh-huh.
shedding light on the evolutionary relationships between different groups of organisms.
And has that happened? Have we found those missing links since Darwin's time?
Paleontologists have unearthed countless fossils that document the transitions between major groups,
Wow.
filling in some of those gaps in the evolutionary story.
That's so cool.
One classic example is Archaeopteryx, a feathered dinosaur with both reptilian and avian features,
Wow.
which provides compelling evidence for the link between dinosaurs and birds.
It's amazing to think that we're still making those kinds of discoveries, piecing together the puzzle of life's history. But even with a fragmented fossil record, Darwin found other compelling evidence to support his theory right.
One of the most fascinating areas he explored was the evolution of complex organs like the human eye.
The eye. It's often cited by creationists as an example of something so intricate that it couldn't possibly have evolved through gradual steps. How did Darwin tackle that one?
He didn't shy away from the challenge. Darwin acknowledged the complexity of the eye,
Yeah.
but he argued that its evolution could be broken down into a series of smaller, more manageable steps,
Uh-huh.
each offering some advantage to its possessor.
So he saw the eye as a product of gradual refinement, not a sudden miraculous creation.
Exactly. He envisioned a scenario where even a simple light-sensitive spot could be beneficial,
Look.
allowing an organism to detect changes in light and shadow.
Mm.
Over time, variations leading to a slightly more focused eye would be favored, and so on.
So each tiny improvement built upon the previous one, eventually leading to the complex eyes we see today.
Precisely. And Darwin pointed to existing organisms with varying degrees of eye complexity,
Right.
from simple light-sensitive patches to more advanced image-forming eyes,
Uh-huh.
as evidence of this gradual process.
It's a reminder that nature often works in increments, not leaps and bounds.
Absolutely. And this brings us to another important distinction Darwin made.
Okay.
The difference between analogy and homology in understanding evolutionary relationships.
Okay, refresh my memory. What's the difference between those two?
Homologous structures are those that share a common evolutionary origin, even if they now serve different functions.
Oh. Okay.
Think of the forelimbs of mammals, the arm of a human, the wing of a bat, the flipper of a whale.
Yeah, okay.
They all have the same basic bone structure because they evolved from a common ancestor.
So it's like variations on a theme, the same underlying blueprint adapted for different purposes over time.
Exactly. Analogous structures, on the other hand, are those that serve similar functions but have different evolutionary origins.
Okay.
Think of the wings of birds and insects. They both enable flight, but their structures are fundamentally different
Yeah.
because they evolved independently.
So similar outcomes, but different evolutionary paths.
Right. Darwin argued that understanding this distinction is crucial for tracing the true relationships between organisms.
Okay.
Focusing solely on function might lead you to group organisms that aren't truly related.
Right.
You have to look deeper at the underlying structures and developmental processes to unravel the true evolutionary story.
It's like being a detective looking for clues to piece together the past.
Exactly.
Speaking of clues, Darwin was also intrigued by those seemingly useless or underdeveloped structures
Yes.
that hinted at an organism's evolutionary history. What were those called again?
He called them rudimentary organs.
Right.
These are structures that were once functional in an organism's ancestors, but have lost their original function over time.
So like the appendix in humans.
Exactly. The appendix is thought to have played a role in digestion in our herbivorous ancestors, but it's now greatly reduced in size and function. Darwin argued that these vestigial structures offer compelling evidence for evolution.
Okay.
They're like echoes of the past, whispering tales of our ancestors.
It's fascinating how these seemingly insignificant remnants can reveal so much about our evolutionary journey.
Yeah.
But didn't Darwin also acknowledge that evolution wasn't always a straight line from simple to complex?
He recognized that evolution could sometimes lead to simplification or loss of structures,
Okay.
depending on the selective pressures faced by an organism.
So it's not always about becoming more complex, but rather about becoming better adapted to your particular environment.
Precisely, Darwin's understanding of evolution was nuanced. He recognized that it was a dynamic process shaped by a complex interplay of factors.
It's amazing how much Darwin was able to deduce about the mechanisms of evolution, considering the limited tools and knowledge available to him at the time.
I know, it's really incredible.
His works really laid the foundation for modern biology.
It did, and his insights continue to inspire new discoveries.
Yeah.
And shape our understanding of the natural world.
Welcome back to our deep dive into On the Origin of Species.
Yeah.
We've covered a lot of ground, from the basic mechanisms of natural selection to the evolution of complex organs and those fascinating rudimentary structures
Right.
that offer glimpses into our evolutionary past.
Right.
But I'm curious, did Darwin address the societal implications of his theory?
He did.
Because his work was obviously groundbreaking scientifically.
Right.
But did he delve into how those ideas might impact the way we view ourselves and our place in the world?
Yeah, Darwin was acutely aware that his theory would challenge deeply held beliefs about humanity's special status in the natural world.
Yeah.
He dedicated a significant portion of his book
Okay.
to addressing potential criticisms and exploring the broader implications of his ideas.
So what were some of the societal hot-button issues that Darwin anticipated?
Well,
Because I imagine this theory sparked some intense debates even beyond the scientific community.
yeah, you're right. One of the most controversial interpretations of Darwin's work was the concept of social Darwinism.
Okay.
This was the idea that natural selection and the notion of survival of the fittest
Right.
could be applied to human societies, justifying social hierarchies and even discriminatory policies.
That's a slippery slope, to say the least.
Yeah.
Using a scientific theory to justify social inequality is problematic on so many levels.
Right.
Did Darwin endorse those ideas himself?
He did not. It's crucial to distinguish between Darwin's scientific theory
Okay.
and the ways in which it was later twisted to fit certain social or political agendas.
Okay.
Darwin believed that human morality and our capacity for cooperation set us apart.
Right.
From other species, he argued that natural selection, while operating on all organisms,
Yeah.
doesn't dictate human morality or social structures.
That's a good reminder that science can be used and misused in various ways.
Yeah,
It's up to us to critically evaluate those applications and ensure that scientific ideas aren't weaponized to support harmful ideologies.
absolutely. It's
Yeah.
important to engage in thoughtful and informed discussions
Yeah.
about the ethical and societal implications of scientific discoveries.
So, setting aside those misinterpretations of his work,
Yeah.
what were some of the broader philosophical questions that Darwin grappled with?
Uh-huh.
How did he reconcile his theory with prevailing religious beliefs of the time?
That's a complex question, and Darwin himself wrestled with it.
Yeah.
He understood that his theory would challenge the traditional view of creation,
Huh?
the idea that each species was individually and divinely created.
It seems inevitable that his work would spark controversy, especially in a society deeply rooted in religious dogma.
It did, and it continues to generate debate today.
Yeah.
Darwin's theory doesn't necessarily negate the existence of a creator,
Right.
but it does offer a different framework
Uh-huh.
for understanding the origins and diversity of life.
So rather than seeing each species as a static product of a single act of creation, Darwin's theory suggests that life is a dynamic process, constantly evolving and adapting over vast periods of time.
Exactly.
Wow. And this view of life has profound implications for how we understand our place in the natural world.
It does.
It shifts the focus from a human-centered perspective
Yeah.
to a more holistic view that recognizes the interconnectedness of all living things.
Yeah. It's humbling.
It's a humbling perspective to see ourselves not as separate from nature,
Right.
but as a part of this vast, intricate web of life, all stemming from a common ancestor.
It is, and this realization has led to a growing awareness of our responsibility
Uh-huh.
to protect and preserve the diversity of life on Earth.
Yeah.
Darwin's work, in a way, laid the foundation
Okay.
for the modern conservation movement.
It makes sense if we recognize that all life is interconnected
Right.
and that we're a part of this delicate balance.
Uh-huh.
Then we have a moral obligation to act as stewards of the natural world.
Precisely. Darwin's work has helped shift our perspective from one of dominance over nature to one of interdependence.
It's been a fascinating journey delving into the depths of Darwin's groundbreaking work.
It has.
His ideas have revolutionized our understanding of biology, sparked ongoing debates about our place in the cosmos,
Right.
and even inspired a deeper appreciation for the interconnectedness of life.
I agree.
So as we conclude this deep dive on the origin of species,
Okay.
I encourage all our listeners to keep exploring, keep questioning,
Yeah.
and keep marveling at the wonders of the natural world. After all, as Darwin showed us,
Uh,
the journey of discovery is never truly over.
it's been a pleasure exploring with you.